So, Asil, we are going to go into another interesting area, and I know we could talk all day on this, the fashion industry, which I know you love and you're close to and you're passionate about. Tell me what your thoughts are on the state of the fashion industry. Where have we gone wrong, maybe, if you can touch on that, and where do you think we
Mhm.
should be going in the future to get to wherever the other side is?
Yeah, you asked me a question when we started, what was my highlight, and I mentioned Harrods, right? And I mentioned it for a number of reasons because of experience, because of the emotional engagement that the leadership had with their teams, because of how they trained us, because it was an institution, because as salespeople, not just as managers, we respected and loved what we were doing. And that's where retail has gone wrong, Chris. I mean, we spoke about that when we connected first time.
Hmm.
That connectivity with just the passion isn't there. And that comes from the fact that, I guess a lot of brands, it's all about money. And when margins are driving your thinking process and where costs are driving your thinking process, then guess what? That's going to impact eventually. It might be a short term gain, but a long term loss. And I think we've lost the magic. We've lost, this passion for the trade. It's all about greed. It's all about chasing your bottom line. More is more, mass consumption that we've seen, this cycle where I came from a world where we had mom and pop stores, where brands
Hmm.
were curated and these individual independent owners, went around the world or sourced really unique product or manufactured locally. I remember, at one point in, Kings Road here in London was the coolest place in town, right? Carnaby Street, all of these independent designers, you'd go and you'd sort of mix and match and create your identity. Now fashion is owned by 4 or 5 conglomerates and that's it.
Hmm.
And so, how can that be inspiring? And there's no way you're going to encourage through that industry as a career. Who
And
wants to
so,
be in retail today?
I see that's an interesting point you raise about these large brands. And I remember, in my years, very quickly, often
Yes.
people would say to me, "You've contributed to every high street in Europe or wherever looking the
Yeah.
same. You've got the same brands." They're not wrong, but I haven't been driving. I've not been driving that. I take responsibility. I take ownership for that.
Yeah.
But that's what you said about consumption, overconsumption, also overconsumption in terms of real estate. So not just in terms of the
Yes.
clothes and the shoes and accessories that you buy. So I've been a contributor to that. Absolutely. I hold my hand up. But I agree with you totally because I've also raised my hand recently saying we need to have more mom and pop stores, as you say, independence, unique concepts, one off that come from different places. We need to bring that marriage of concepts into what we do. But my question to you, Asil, is the major brands that are out there, do you think that it would be appropriate for them to look at additional concepts that they can create? We know some of them do, some of the big brands, and go into that little, so they've got their big stores, big chains and smaller ones. Should they be the precursor to that as well, kind of giving back in a way to develop new brands, new concepts? Is that a way
As in
forward?
invest in new brands, is that what you're saying? Or for them to create new business models? What's
They
the
well,
question?
a bit of both. I mean, they can, um, without well, H&M, let's name them. H&M have acquired
Yeah.
certain small brands and taken that into their family, but then there are also other owners and brands that have created from inside. Sadly, they haven't made it. Some have bombed, some have not been successful. So it's a bit of both. Should they invest in and buy smaller ones and make them something bigger, or should they,
The
build from
problem
scratch?
with that, Chris, so to answer both of your questions, first and foremost, yes, all of these groups should be doing a lot more to support emerging talent. They should be, but should be doing it independently. That doesn't mean that you take them, you suck them up into your corporate world, drum them into doing the efficiencies or processes and all of the bureaucracy that you have, because
Right.
guess what? You zap the entire life out of this brand and he ends up just like you, except smaller, right?
Brilliant.
So
Love
if
that.
you set up a foundation, yes, an investment fund to impact socially, to allow these designers to be independent, truly independent, which doesn't mean they sit under your umbrella. That, you know, Esila Attar and Chris Igwe could have their own boutique and they're funded just like a, you know, angel investor or venture capitalist. That's great, because you leave them alone to manage their own identity, you know, and grow like they should. So yes, if they do it that way, unfortunately, they don't. Right? Unfortunately, they don't. They zap them into their world, and then the brand disappears. And the lucky ones, you know, just become another footprint that looks exactly like their next door. So, you know, it's a big question, but I stand very strong on that. So they don't do enough. And
No,
actually, they need to back off, right? And hopefully this situation will allow this, Chris. It will allow these brands to recognize that more isn't more. They won't be able to sustain the retail outlets that they have, the square footage that they dominate. By natural default, they are not going to be, because look at the street, it's completely empty. You know, everyone's mindset has changed. So by default, this has to sort of reset in any case.
Brilliant.
The
Love that,
balance of
Esther.
power.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's great insight. Truly valuable for me as well to hear that. Let's take it to another level then. You talk about the physical. So we have bricks and mortar, and we have online. Online, as we know, has grown, especially in the, you know, essential retail, let's call it that for the want of a better term, and that has grown. But the indications are that online is going to grow anyway on a continual basis. What's your view on the bricks and mortar versus online? Or is it, as many studies have shown, holistic or halo effect? So everything is contributing. But where do you kind of see the way forward in terms of bricks and mortar and online? Let's stay with the fashion industry for a minute. Do you think fashion should focus much more on one or the other or both? And if so, how would that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you know, I'm a bricks and mortar gal, right? So, and there is nothing that will ever, and we had that discussion even when you and I spoke, you know, we both firmly believe that that's not going anywhere. And what's really interesting for me, Chris, is I sat back the last 6 months and watched people's reaction to try to navigate this madness and these businesses. And of course, the natural reaction is to move everything to online, clearly. And we, you know, before we got on this, you know, call, we were discussing the numbers of stores that were shutting down, which is a good thing because that's sort of a cleansing, right? But you will never replace that human touch. You will never replace that, you know, feeling of actually physically browsing a store, trying something on, engaging with the, you know, the customers or the staff. That's never going to be taken over. But there are benefits to online. But always the $1 million question is, how do you create that perfect hybrid where both of them can live, you know, in a great world? What concerns me, though, about this rush to online is that it's a number of things. One is not the answer, right? So, you know, assuming that you can transform, like many huge brands that I've seen literally shut down 200 stores overnight, transform their entire business to online, thinking that that was going to save, not reminding themselves that the entire reason for the last 25 years of their existence has been because of bricks and mortar. The whole clientele, every customer experience has been because of bricks and mortar. Because up until 6 months ago, that revenue that they got from online, if at best, was 10%. So they've just taken this insane decision to kill 90% of their business. I don't know who's advising them. I have no idea, but it baffles me, Chris.
Obviously not you, Asil. So
obviously not me, and obviously not you, because to take these drastic measures and shut down 90% of where your income is generated because you think that overnight 90% is going to be reflected online is a huge problem therein. The other thing is, actually, what they're not really thinking is the more we're on lockdown, the more we're deprived of human engagement. Guess what? We want it more than ever. We want that need. And that's why you see every time we get out of a lockdown, people are flocking together in groups. I've never seen so many people congregate. I've never gone in the streets of London, Chris, and seen places packed. On a typical day, they would have a normal number of people. But now, because they know that this is something that they have now lacked. They're just in the droves. There's hundreds
mm,
of people. So what does
yeah,
that tell you? That tells you actually you've deprived them, and what they will naturally want is a place to be. And so you've gone and killed that as well. So they're really reacting in a very negative way to this, whereas they should be thinking balance. I might not need, 200, but I'll need 50 in the right place to allow that, engagement to happen.
mm,
So that's really, and the other thing that bothers me about online is they're not considering environmentally the impact that this is having, Chris, because I did a talk a few days ago and I was explaining that online boasts the fact that you can shop sizes. If I go and I can get a small, medium, a large, figure it out and return it at my comfort. Online, of course, it's about ease, it's about pace. They don't recognize that 90% of the returns that you do go to landfill, Chris. They don't get steam ironed and dry
yeah,
cleaned and land back on this.
exactly.
So what they're actually promoting online is complete environmental chaos.
Mm,
But they're
mm,
not saying that when you go to shop a product and when you go to that cart, they're not flagging, by the way, your decision, even though we say we're going to pay for your packaging, pay for your postage if you return it, they're not flagging these items, these 3 sizes that you're going to try on and return are going to end up here,
mm,
causing X, Y, and Z.
mm.
They're promoting this horrendous situation. So it's not a great place what we're in right now. It's not this or that. Everything in life, Chris, is a balance, right? You know that. It's a perfect
Absolutely.
blend.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
indeed. So, Asil, I think I just want to tag that on to something a little bit different, because you picked up on an important point, which is our need to get together. We know that the food and beverage industry is very challenged as well. How do you think, and maybe some of your cultural background and experience can help here, when we look at people, we look at connection, we look at interaction, how would you see, for example, the food and beverage, the restaurant world addressing the changes in the customer today and what he or she need or they need going forward? How can we get that balance? You've talked about balance just then and also
Yeah.
previously. I'd like to know, in the context of food and beverage, what do you see?
You know what's interesting, Chris, is I had that conversation actually with my husband yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that anything after 6 months becomes habit, right? We know that.
Mm,
That's in anything, in exercise and lifestyle and anything that you do, after it goes past a certain period, it becomes habit. And therefore, this is now habit. The social distancing that we see in restaurants, how the restaurants are catering for people, all of the way that they're managing them with the takeout as well as service and dining. Everywhere I've been, it's a habit. There's nothing that they're doing that is initially it was very awkward, right? Because a lot of these restaurants were suffering hugely and
right.
carrying out these big discount measures, coming and, trying to encourage people to obviously come back into their dining experience, get 50% off. We had, I think, all of September and August was 50% in any restaurant all over the UK, for example, in order to encourage people back. But fast forward, now you go into a restaurant and you see whether it's the plastic or the glass, partitions, whether you
Mm,
see the 2 meter or 1 meter distance between the table, where you see a waiter with a mask, where all of these precautions that they're taking are now become norm. So
mm,
what was
mm,
initially a huge issue and they were trying to pull back the crowds is today become a habit and your expectation, right? So I
mm.
think that dining, restaurants, F&B is definitely going to come back. And you know what? I also think as a hygiene, it's great. I'm really happy going into a restaurant now and it's not packed to the tilt with
Mm,
50,000 people crammed, because F&B over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years was so successful, Chris. This
mm, mm,
ride, this whole ride of F&B and everybody, whether it's franchising or opening new outlets and going, it became insane. I mean, you have to wait millions of months to go eat somewhere. When you get there, there's queues of people, they're packed, you're sitting on each other, you're breathing on each other. This is joyous. It might not be great for the restaurateur or the business owner, but from a consumer, you can actually go and have quite a decent meal. So my
mm,
point being is it is habit now. People have conformed. I think also, the business owners themselves are every day learning how to manage this, right? And so once the issue is the lockdowns, I think that's the issue, because that's it's really affecting every business, right? And that's where you're at the cusp of being able to survive, especially in F&B. But if they adopted this new way, then I think it's going to be business as usual. I don't see a huge issue with it.
But I guess, Asil, it's a similar thing to fashion, which is that there have been so many restaurants that have grown up over the past 5, 10 years maximum, really. Some of them were going to fail anyway. So sad as it is, it's a reality. The question is, what should that now become? What should those spaces be? How should the business model transform itself?
Well, it should be similar to what we were saying, like the mom and pop, this appetite of, no pun intended, of having, 1,000 outlets. It's the same as fashion, or having 500, or having being available in every mall, in every corner of every street. Being the Starbucks, every restaurant has a Starbucks model, right? You're available in every corner, because they were growing. And we've learned very quickly that you can grow a certain amount, but look, now everyone's frantically resizing their portfolio, shutting it down. So again, in moderation, no matter how amazing a concept is, Chris, I think when you're looking at an expansion strategy or growing a brand, you have to consider. But the issue is usually, businesses are always looking at, more means more. Instead of opening 50 and ensuring that they're protected and they're absolutely profitable and you're able to manage them in a risk situation. No, let's open 1,500 outlets and let's figure it out when life is good. Well, there you go. I think this has been a huge lesson for everyone, right? In terms of even strategically, how do you map it out? And you don't need restaurants are becoming, huge formats as well. 5,000 square foot restaurants, and it's ridiculous. So I think, where you've seen flourishing F&B is the mom and pops, right? Good old fashioned pizzerias, good old fashioned this and that. That's who's managed to ride the wave, because it's about cost again.
I
What's
totally
your
agree.
view on it, Chris? What are your thoughts?
I totally agree with you. I think that a few years ago, and it's not that long, as we know, fads and things, surf the wave, as it were. So food and beverage is pretty much, as a discussion, about 10 years old now. It's been around for a while, but the whole, how to get bigger and percentage of GLA in malls and whatever growing and doubling, in fact, in depending on the country. So it's been a real surge towards doing that. I totally agree. I love the centers which I've been to, or projects or locations where you can go and try a little bit of everything and enjoy it as well. So it gives you the desire to come back, because in an evening or lunchtime, you can't eat everything, can you? So you think, oh, that was really nice, I must come back for that. So I think there is indeed a sorting out of the whole F&B, the curating, if you like, and finding the right things. But I do think equally, for them to survive, there's got to be a business model that is different from the I pay rent to the landlord, and I make this profit. So back to your P&L observation with regard to being a CEO. But I think the industry has to understand that the model has got to be different from what it is currently, because the margins are so tight, as you say. The turnover of staff is quite crazy. Some of my children have worked in restaurants, and whilst they're diligent, but the number of people they say, oh, she's gone, they're tough out.
Of course.
So I think through the whole process, there's got to be some resolution around that, some changing. But we do need great food locations or places to eat. So I think the quality has got to go up, but not in terms of quantity of number of outlets. I agree with you.
No, absolutely. And what's really a shame is because, for example, being in the Middle East, of course, which is a hugely joint venture or franchise-led business model. One of the things that, I saw over the last 10 years specifically is, of course, a lot of the groups would go out and they would hunt for these really cool F&B concepts, in the US or Europe. A lot of the times these concepts were family-owned businesses, whether it was frozen yogurt or whether it was, like I said, pizza, whatever the genre is. And they would come back and they would open 150 of what you would maybe go to New York and see it in a couple of avenues, and it was still a really homegrown concept. Suddenly, because and of course, it's a double-edged thing, because the business owner is thinking, oh my gosh, my little muffin or cupcake shop can suddenly have 100 outlets and I can be earning this amount. So that's contributed a lot, right, from both sides. And I think that's where it all went wrong, Chris, is because they took these really special, and that's why they were so amazing, because in New York, that bakery happened to be for the local community, freshly baked, was part of their culture. Everybody on their way to work would, pick up their whatever. Suddenly that's in every mall, every single location, and you can't turn if you don't see that bakery or whatever it is. And then suddenly that's no longer exciting, right? I mean, you've had it once, you've had it twice, 350 times later. And that's where I think a lot of these businesses are now struggling, the scale of what they've done. But like you said, the standard and quality, I mean, that was done by a family, doing all of that creation, and now it's just churned out. So big problem, exactly like fashion.
And it is also, Asil, just to finish off on that, and we'll go on to another topic in a minute. I think equally, we have been so demanding as consumers. So to your very point, I think that's incredibly valid. When the first concept comes out and the food tastes and is, there's a lot of love and attention and support that goes into making that particular food, it's fantastic. But when you then duplicate it, clearly you have different chefs, maybe you have, systems, whatever. So the processes aren't the same. And by the time you get to the 10th one, you go, it's not as good as it used to be, or they've, had to manage the margins of the raw materials, so they're not as good, they're not the right taste and everything else. So it is definitely a challenge.
And also that emotional part. I mean, I've been in, when we have gone as businesses to source those F&B, it's been really interesting, because I'll be sitting in that restaurant and the owner would be doing that dish for us, and we would be tasting that. And there was this whole experience going around. And that's why we fell in love with that concept in the first place. And then, like I said, fast forward, well, the owner isn't in every location, and it's certainly not that attention that's being paid. And so you're the compromise, I guess, of everything. So it's going to be interesting times.
Yeah, I just want to share, came to my mind. As you know, we talked before, I used to be at Gap, and Mickey Drexler was the former CEO, and I saw him on a webinar recently, and Mickey was never big on international expansion anyway for Gap, but we did it anyway because there were other reasons to continue to expand. But he said something incredibly interesting on a webinar 3 months ago, maybe now. He said, I believe, that's him, that every retailer or brand should have a maximum of 50 stores.
That's
which
exactly what I said.
So it's, for him, it's like, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Now, okay, he's gone to big and small, and we all have, but I thought that was a valuable owning up to, kind of, like I said, you've owned up, I've owned up to, our responsibilities during this whole process. And I just thought it was interesting, whether it's 50 or 40 or 30, doesn't really matter, but the idea of less being more is clearly where we need to be going forward. So just wanted to
but I mean, that's always where it's been, right? I think just everybody lost their way and started chasing the dollar, Chris. I mean, for the last 30 years, that's all I've ever said. And I've always been the bad guy in the room. That's all I've ever said. It is a lot less is more. It is about experience. Guys, it's about brand. Please, it's about brand integrity. It's about passion. It's about blah, blah, blah. And that's all they're hearing, right? Because they're thinking, whatever, it's about opening another 1,500 outlets, negotiating the best deal. And, and that's why I don't last in a lot of roles as well, because I simply don't believe in, those strategies. I'm always about that personal, that bespoke, that experience, because that's, to one of the questions you asked earlier, that's the magic that's lost, Chris. That. Like you said, you put all of these brands in these huge locations, and there's an argument, because if we're talking about our focus in Asia or China, then that's a whole other ball game, right? Keep it there. Keep it there, and don't impose it on the rest of the world, right? Just because
they've got millions of people out there, so
that's right. So you keep it there. Maybe you want to open thousands of outlets there. Good for you, but back home, keep it real. And I think that's the message. Keep it real. Gosh, stop being greedy.
Keep it real, keep it real. Let's talk, Asil, about your management and leadership. I don't like the word management. Let's maybe put it aside, because managing is one thing, leading is totally different. Your leadership qualities and skills are around the human and the compassionate. Now, at the very beginning of this conversation, you touched on it, but let's drill down a little bit more into that, because there is kind of their opposite today, the human piece you talked about earlier on, and the compassionate piece. How do we refine it as, and I'm not talking CEO, as you know, only, it can be any level. We manage teams. It could be 3 people, it could be 300. I know you've managed thousands. How do we bring that human and compassionate piece back in and motivate our teams to be successful in the future? Big topic, I know.
The secret ingredient, I mean, you said it, Chris, it's human. That's why when you asked me, or we spoke earlier, I define myself as a human leader, because if we remind ourselves that we're all human, guess what? That's a really great place, because that's humbling, right? Because we all, nobody's perfect at the end of the day. We are all human, which means we're led by emotions. Everyone, especially in the industries that we're in, there are very emotionally led, people engaged experiences. I mean, that's simply that. So how do we reignite that? Let me tell you, if this pandemic hasn't reignited that human element in people, I don't know what will. I'm lost for words,
I agree.
But seriously, I mean, if this is a moment, if you can't be in touch with your human side, and you can't, this is the one moment where the entire globe, every individual is affected. It is not just about, that country is going through it and I get on with my day job. I have never spoken to so many people in every different, corner of their life or career position or situation, where we're all in it together. We're all trying to survive. And of course, the lucky ones that are the ones who have maybe better incomes, maybe, a different disposition. But generally, the mass public, are really going through a very tough time, Chris, and so, and that's from different elements. And I think that's why this is such an unusual moment, because the whole world actually is going through one same emotion, but different facets of that same emotion. So, how do you reignite it? Is because you are. I mean, if you don't have feelings, and that's the issue with corporates, right? Is that feeling, that emotional part is just, it stops at the doorstep. It's not allowed to come in, because it's such a money driven, I guess, psyche. And for me, I mean, people first, profits later. And guess what? It's worked every time. Duh. Because it's about respect, integrity, allowing people to feel that they're part of this journey. It's about every way that you approach a human being, because it stems from the simple fact that human integrity, respect. If you don't respect,
Sorry, Asil, I just want to drill into that. So if, as in many of these companies, there are individuals who've been there for a long time, or who have very senior levels and positions, and haven't demonstrated that human element, or don't know how to find it, what do we do then? What do we do then?
Well, you know what? If you don't know how to find it, then that's an issue in itself. And maybe you've gotten away with it for this long, but that's my point, Chris. Today, if you don't change that, if the board or whoever, the shareholder, does not recognize that, guess what, you need to have some humanity in you to survive this, then don't be surprised when you're in business in the next 6 months. What I'm saying is that it's not an option. You might have run it like that in the past. You might have gotten away with running it like that in the past. And that's not because of your genius or managing your, your financials. It's because circumstance allowed you to be profitable. In 2016, when everyone was making profit, you were part of the cycle. In all of these moments when business was peaking, you're not the only independent company that's peaking. The entire landscape economically is peaking. And when you're in a recession, you're all in a recession. right? But what you need to make sure is, how do you ride those challenges, is that human touch. And today more than ever, if you don't have leaders that are showcasing empathy, then you're not going to survive. I don't care how healthy your balance sheet is, Chris. It is only going to carry you for a certain time.
I agree.
Because what's very interesting now, and you will know that, and you just mentioned it, is now the consumers are demanding. See, before that, you were pushing. All of your communication was out. You're pushing, pushing, pushing. It's a push model. But today the tables really have turned, honestly. And now when customers start asking questions, and they're asking questions like, I haven't even heard from you the last 6 months. Suddenly you want my money again? Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. You haven't even pulled me through your journey. You forgot I existed. And suddenly you're now pushing back your marketing in my face and reminding me, where were you when I needed you the most? It's really, so all of this is something, because I'm involved in it every day. I'm seeing, how people have communicated through the last 6 months. Businesses have communicated, corporates have communicated. That's where you're going to see that change. So you don't have a choice. You better start being human. Yeah.
And so, Asil, that's interesting. So I agree totally with you. Communication has been lost, and I've had that like anybody else. You seem to have been, you're non-existent, and then suddenly they want to reconnect with you because
Yeah.
before the second wave, and they thought it was all over, and it doesn't happen.
Yes.
But let's go into, so there's, I think, communication, marketing is a very important department anyway. I think HR, which you've touched on, clearly is within it. But let's face towards the consumer just now. What do you think the leadership qualities might be in order to re-engage? So let's say, yes, I've been one of those 6 months, nobody's talked to me. Now you're going to talk to me. How do you re-engage with me and lead me forward? So this is more corporate to consumer as opposed to within the entity itself.
Well, the first thing I would do if I were running that business is I would send an apology to all of my stakeholders, internally and externally. Seriously, Chris, you're asking me, putting myself in that shoe. If I had my head down for 6 months trying to figure it out and survive, and in fairness, a lot of businesses have, and they might not have that, intelligence or wisdom to maybe take people along the way. And maybe their approach is, let's just fix it before we do communicate it. I would definitely start with a huge apology and explaining why I disappeared the last 6 months, right? Explaining to them that I have been very busy trying to sort this out, whatever it is, the brand, the business, the corporate, to enable me to provide you a better service, to enable me to navigate, and requiring your support. Because now I've got my head out the water, I can share with you. Because I mean, during my 30 years, Chris, I've been a very transparent, and that's shocked the boards. They'll tell me things like, you cannot say this to the entire organization, and I'll leave the room, and guess what? I'll make a video and I'll tell the entire organization, we're going to start cutting costs. You might be losing your job, but I'm going to do because without that honesty, it's going to come back and bite you. You can only hide for a while. So now an apology why you've disappeared, an explanation why you find it now appropriate to resurface and want to engage. And perhaps then from that point on, actually authentically really being part of that journey and really being available and really communicating, because you've now explained yourself, right? So yes, I've disappeared. Now I'm back. This is why. And maybe together you can help me make it better. Because right now it's about a two-way relationship, Chris. No brand or business can survive with just resurfacing and then pushing communication at you. Oh, buy my product, be there, come and eat my food. Who cares? Who cares? Because right now, whatever money I have vested, I'm not going to be, you're not my priority. Honestly, Chris, surviving is everyone's priority, not spending. So you're going to have to work very hard to engage and re-engage that customer. So that's what I'd start with. Sorry, I disappeared.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's fantastic. And those listening to this must definitely take that away as an idea, is, as you say, total honesty. Say, you've been, and you're right,
how it is.
Fixing the business. They've been trying and doing their best, maybe laying some people off, whatever. Apologize, explain the situation, and seek to re-engage with them. I think that's absolutely amazing.
And you know what? The great thing, Chris, is that people aren't going to be surprised because everyone's in the same boat. So it's no big deal if you confess that you've done all the things that you've done because everybody else has. So
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got a really easy slate right now. But if you keep quiet for much longer, Chris, it's not going to
Mm,
be, you're not going
yeah.
to survive this game. No
No,
way.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to wrap up very soon, but
Yeah.
there is one question that inevitably comes to mind, or maybe it's more of a thought. Looking forward, you're obviously a very optimistic person, Nasil, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
which is great, just what we need. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
What do you see as the green shoots going forward? And let's take two areas, one in leadership and one in retail or fashion, if you wanted to break it down. What are the things that you look out and you go, looking forward to that?
I think when it comes to leadership, Chris, what's been amazing for me that I've seen is that camaraderie between leaders, because I've never, ever in all my years have spoken to so many, have been introduced to so many, met so many. It's not because I have a talk show. It's because just the industry that, they're gravitating towards each other for problem solving and coming up with solutions. So there's this really interesting space where these leaders are recognizing, you know what, I have a shared issue with my neighbor, even if he's a competitor. So there's this whole community of sort of talking and sharing that's happening between executives, the smart ones,
Mm,
right? Who are networking, but for a very different reason, right? The networking is to share, like I said, a lot of the problems they're facing because it's a shared issue across, no matter what industry. So I think from a leadership, that's really exciting to see. Before it was about, keeping it very competitive. If I have my strategy, then that's my strategy and I'm not going to share it. But now I see a lot of leaders, openly. I mean, I've spoken to people who have openly talked about their strategies and, what they're going to be doing for the next 6 to 12 months. So that's really a big difference,
mm,
because you
mm,
would never get them to open up about very detailed, processes that they're putting in place. So that's a great difference in, leadership and strategic thinking that I've seen.
mm,
And I think in terms of, fashion or retail, like we've said, this is an opportunity for the younger or also the traditional retailers or the mom and pops or this new generation or these innovators. It's their time to make their footprint. And it's about, everything is becoming very locally driven, which is really exciting to see. All these farmers markets are popping up, all of these community initiatives are happening, all of these designers are having to produce locally as opposed to send it. So there's this whole excitement of sort of community spirit that's happening, which is through retail and fashion. I see it. So I think I spoke to someone the other day and she said, Asil, they locked down or they shut down 85 streets in New York through the lockdown. And she said, but they took a decision to keep them closed forever. And she said, that's going to change the entire sort of spirit of New York to an
mm,
amazing, because they're going to be paved. That means people are going to be walking more, less pollution, and you're going to get to see parts of New York you've never experienced because you've
mm,
never been
mm,
able to drive there, or it cost you a fortune to sort of cab it there, whatever it is. So just these things that have happened, which means, for the mom and pops or for these retailers, or these brands that happen to be on these 85 major roads, or streets in New York, that's going to be a huge benefit, because she said,
mm,
she was saying that we've seen cafes and people sitting out on the pavement, and it's like, she said it's so very 80s and 90s, where we had this community, and that's so cool, right?
mm,
So
mm,
I think that's the great thing that we're seeing out of this as well, is that sort of community spirit. So those are
mm.
the two optimistic things that I see. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic, Asil.
Amazing,
Yes,
Chris.
it has been terrific listening to you. I've got some gems from you as well. So anybody else out there, you're never too late or too old to learn some cool stuff from Asil. She's got some amazing ideas. I've got two definite takeaways, which I'll share with you separately that I hadn't thought about. I'm going, smart
Amazing.
lady, smart
Amazing,
lady.
Chris. You're fantastic. I love our conversations. This is going to be one of many, because, we share a lot, right? We're very
We do.
like-minded. And I think,
Mm,
what I love about you is your energy and your intelligence, and you're so composed when I'm such a nut job. And I think that makes a great, it makes a great combo, right?
Teamwork.
Yeah, seriously, it works really, really great. And I just love our conversation. So this is going to be one of many Turn the Tables. And, thank you so much for taking your time out to do this. And I hope it's going to be, I know it's going to be very valuable for everyone listening. So
Well,
you have
thank
an
you so much
amazing,
for the invitation. Thank you,
thank
Asiel. I
you. Have
appreciate
a
it.
great day and stay safe. Yeah.
I will do. You too. Take care of yourself.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.